All right, guys, I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the essay you're going to have to write with the Spanish flu documents. I have William Howard Taft here to help me explain. So he and I will both help explain to you guys how to write the Spanish flu DBQ essay. It's the same rubric we've always used, but we're just going to kind of walk through that. You ready, Taft? Taft, are you ready? He's ready. Look how ready he is. Never been more ready in his life. All right. So I have the screen shared with you guys. So remember, focus primarily, first and foremost, on the prompt. Make sure you're clearly addressing and understanding the prompt. And the prompt, as you'll see here, um, is asking, based on the documents from the Spanish flu DBQ, so the ones that you should have analyzed last week, and again, if you haven't analyzed them yet, please make sure to do that before you try to write this essay. Analyze the responses to the spread of influenza in the early 20th century. Now, when a prompt asks you to analyze something, it's basically asking you to make some sort of conclusions based on those responses. So, are there certain areas of the world that responded in similar ways? Were there certain types of people throughout the world that responded a certain way? So, think of the documents and where they came from and who wrote them, and see if you can sort of fit them into categories as you write your essay and as you plan out your essay. It's a good idea to write an outline for this, a persuasive outline, before you launch into it. And if you're not totally sure if it makes sense what you're trying to write, feel free to reach out to me and I can give you feedback on what you have so far. Feedback is key. William Howard Taft here always gives me feedback whenever he's hungry, so he gets fed on time. Don't you, Taft? Yeah, yeah, you do. So anyway, um, the rubric, as I mentioned before, is essentially the same one as the power dynamics essay. It's kind of the same rubric we've been working with all year. It's very heavily based on the AP World History rubric, if you remember that one. But your first point is your contextualization one, and that usually works very well in your introduction. So you can describe in a few sentences the broader historical and global context relevant to the prompt. So when the flu pandemic happened in 1918, 1919, think about what was going on at that time. Another thing you can do is just talk about pandemics in general. This would be a great time to bring in the current pandemic and maybe tie in the historical parallels there. That's a great way to sort of paint the picture, set the scene, whatever you want to call it, before you launch into your argument so that the reader kind of gets the sense of what you're getting at and why this is such a big deal. The next point is arguably your most important point because so much of your essay revolves around that, and that is your thesis. Your thesis needs to clearly respond to the prompt with a relevant and coherent claim that establishes a line of reasoning. Remember, a thesis basically has two parts. It has your claim, which answers the prompt, and your three main topics, body paragraphs, whatever you want to call them, that backs up your claim. Now, your claim is a little bit tough here because the prompt just asks you to analyze the responses. So you're going to need to explain sort of the range of responses to the spread of influenza in the early 20th century. So did people take it seriously? Did people take it too seriously? Were people sort of beside themselves with panic and grief that that's what they were dealing with? How did they try to explain the spread of influenza? How did they try to make sense of it? What were governments doing? Did people react negatively to their government? Did people full-heartedly support their government? Those sort of things to consider as you're trying to create an argument that is coherent, that you can fit all of your documents into. You got to be able to fit the documents into your argument. Much in the same way that William Howard Taft fits a whole can of cat food into his fat cat stomach every single day, along with 1/3 of a cup of dry cat food, which is how he has become the 16-pound pile of cat that he is. Yeah, we don't fat shame here, Taft. You're beautiful the way you are. Look at you. You know it. Anyway, your next 2 points are specific evidence. It's a little bit different than what you saw in the power dynamics essay. Your specific evidence, to get the full 2 points for it. Taft's getting up. He gets all excited when you talk about evidence. Nope, he's just readjusting so he can take a different position for his nap. He's had a tough day. He's only gotten about 10 hours of sleep so far. He's got to make sure he gets in his tight 15. Otherwise, he's real cranky. Anyway, back to evidence. To get the full 2 points, you need to use at least 8 specific examples from at least 8 documents relevant to your argument as expressed in your thesis. Now, with these, you can sort of lump some of them together. If you see kind of the same sort of example being expressed in different documents, you can do that. So like if you see the government employing heavy amounts of medical personnel, for example, you could do something to that effect. You could say, in document 1 and 6 or whatever, however you want to put together, we see the government employing high amounts of medical personnel in order to deal with the pandemic. That's okay to do. You just got to make sure you're using 8 specific examples for 8 documents, and you can tie them together. But I'm really looking to see you accurately and coherently incorporate at least 8 documents. If you manage to get 4 documents, that'll get you 1 point. But if you get the full 2 points, that'll get you 8 points. Your 4th rubric item is your independent knowledge / research. That means you're using one example from outside of the assigned readings to build your argument. For this one, you can use a variety of things. I would recommend, if you really want to get really, really hardcore, you could find another piece of evidence from the Spanish flu to tie into this. Another thing you could do, which could also kind of tie into your historical complexity point down here, and actually that should be number 6. Fix that real quick. All right. And rubric item 6, where you want to get the deep, complex understanding, you could tie into another pandemic. So if you brought in an example from the pandemic we're dealing with now with COVID-19, you could also throw in an example from the bubonic plague. To sort of give further historical context for this. That's okay if that helps prove your point. So if you were talking, for example, about how in the documents you have people trying to use religion to explain the plague, you could use a ton of examples from our earlier DBQ on the Christian and Muslim responses to the bubonic plague. You could also look at maybe what maybe people are saying today in response to COVID-19 and how religion could explain it. Or you could talk about the absence of religion. Whatever you want to do, as long as you're using documents from around history to help bolster your argument, that'll get you your independent knowledge / research point. Your structure argumentation portion is 3 points. The first one is just very clear structure. Do you have 5 paragraphs, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion? And are you smoothly transitioning from one paragraph to the next? Meaning, use transitional phrases or words. The most basic way to do it is you could start your body paragraphs with first, second, and lastly. That's kind of the go-to easy way. If you want to sort of go to the next level, you could maybe sort of allude to your next body paragraph topic at the end of the previous topic, and sort of make it more coherent. You don't want your essay to read sort of like a bullet point of arguments. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a nice coherent, singular thing that has a lot of parts to it. Next is your body paragraphs begin with topic sentences that reflect the arguments presented in the line of reasoning found in the thesis, meaning your body paragraphs reflect what you wrote in your thesis, and it's clear that your body paragraphs are revolving around that whole topic, that it's a nice coherent argument, the reader knows what they're getting themselves into, can clearly follow your line of reasoning, and can clearly follow your argumentation. Remember, your readers got to follow you. If they can't follow you, they can't understand you. And if a reader can't understand what they're reading, they're probably not going to read it anymore, and they're going to give up and try to read something they can. That's just kind of how it works. Lastly, Mr. Weber needs to learn how to spell. Evidence is clearly and coherently connected to the thesis through argumentation. What that point essentially means is that you are explaining your evidence and you are explaining how it proves your overall point. You are not letting the evidence just sit by itself and expecting it to argue itself. You're also not just giving an argument with no evidence, you're putting them together. Like, remember the example I always give. If I'm trying to defend William Howard Taft here for a murder case because he's a murderer, and I were to say my client, um, was my client taking a nap, and I don't explain it at all. Just say, "Up, he's taking a nap." There you go. I need to explain my client was taking a nap at the time of the murder, and when the murder was happening, he was fast asleep because he sleeps forever or he licks himself as he likes to do, and therefore he could not have committed that murder because he was too asleep to kill anybody. That's my argument. I can't just say, "Oh yeah, he's innocent because he naps. Look at him. Look at how nappy he is." Okay, and he likes to sniff books apparently too. Weirdo. You're a weirdo. Did you know that? Yeah, weirdo. Anyway, so make sure you explain your evidence, you explain your documents, and you explain what they all mean. Okay, I think I offended him. Nope, he's just adjusting again. Okay. Um, Lastly, your number 6 rubric point is for at least one document. You explain why the document's point of view, purpose, or historical situation and or audience is relevant to the argument. Is there a particular document where the person who wrote it needs to be addressed in terms of why they might be biased? Remember, when we look at point of view, or we look at purpose and that sort of thing, you want to consider, who a person is, does that influence how believable they are? Let me try to explain that again. So if you have a document coming from, um, say a church publication, a religious publication, and they are basically saying that, to do something like suspend church services is ridiculous because this plague came from God and we need to embrace things that came from God. You would want to address that, well, this comes from a church publication. So, of course, they're going to express ideas anti shelter in place or that sort of thing, because that sort of wrecks what they're trying to do, which is bring people together. That's how a church has to function. That's just an example. You can use that if you want, but that would be something to consider. That, yeah, of course they're probably going to say that because that's what they believe. Or if you had, say, a business that's getting ruined by policies that relate to trying to stop the pandemic. Like if you have a movie theater owners association and they all say, we don't think this pandemic's really that bad. People should be able to go out and do things. Yeah, of course they're going to say that because they want people to go to their movie theaters so they can continue to make money and continue in business. So those are the sort of questions you got to ask yourself when you're looking at who wrote these things. Do they have any agenda? Is there any reason for them to perhaps exaggerate certain things? Is there any reason for them to lie or anything about what they're trying to say and who they are and what perspective they're coming from that may influence what they're trying to do? The last part of your addresses all parts of the question portion is you need to, at some point, demonstrate that there is a deep and complex development within the prompt. So that usually fits very well in the conclusion when you give your significance statement. Why is this important? Why should we care about this? And that's where you want to use one of your spec phrases. What is this a symbol of? What is this setting a precedent for? What is this an example of? And what is this maybe causing in the future? This would be a great opportunity to maybe use the precedent portion or the symbol portion, especially considering the times that we're in right now. This is your chance to really make that clear connection between the Spanish flu epidemic that we're reading about in these documents to maybe what we're dealing with today. Is there a clear parallel? Are they not tied really well at all? Are they just two completely separate things? What can we learn from this? This is where you sort of bring this all together and really drive home why this is important. Hopefully you can see, based on the world that's around us, that looking at the Spanish flu epidemic, there is a lot of things we can learn and can draw upon in terms of what happened then and what is happening now. As I mentioned in the Google post from yesterday, or actually earlier today, this essay, of course, is not going to be a summative because we're not giving any summative assessments right now. But this can replace a grade that you received on your first essay that you wrote this semester. So that can go there. We can also maybe look at how it could maybe replace other summatives. So a lot of incentive to do this. And also, this is just a skill that you need to know how to do further along in your academic life when you write essays for other classes. And also, it's just a good skill to have. This is just a good skill to have in order how to build an argument, how to build a coherent case, whatever it is you may be arguing, whether it's what college you should go to, what you should buy, why somebody should vote for a political candidate, whatever it is just a good skill to have in terms of using evidence, putting it all together, examining whether it's valid or not, and figuring out how to work it into a nice, coherent, and readable argument. Please let me know if you have any questions. I will be on the Google Meet at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. So please do check that out and feel free to ask questions. And have a great day. Have a great night. And hopefully everybody is healthy and happy as they can be. And Taft wishes you a good night as well, even though he's asleep. Wake up, jerk. There you go. Okay. All right, guys. Take care and best of luck.